I first want to talk about the concept of inspiration. And I'm going to use a Sanskrit word, and the Sanskrit word is sankalpa. And I'm going to put that in the chat bar here for everybody to see. Okay, there you go, sankalpa. It's a Sanskrit term. And so sankalpa is a commitment. It means a vow, an intention. We might think of it, maybe one of the closest words we could use would be a resolution. I like to think of it as a profound commitment emanating from our heart. So it's a heartfelt desire that reflects our higher ideals. So this idea of a sankalpa is this heartfelt desire that leads to this profound commitment that reflects our higher ideals. I'll give you an example. A sankalpa that I have is my vow, my intention, my heartfelt desire is to be truthful. So my sankalpa is to live in truthfulness, to seek truth, to be related to the truth, to do everything I can to live from the truth. And so my sankalpa is to be oriented in that way. It's my commitment, if you will. Now, sometimes I have said in the past that another sankalpa of mine would be to remain abstinent from drugs and alcohol. That's a sankalpa, right? That's my vow, if you will. And I'm good with that as a sankalpa, you know? And I also realize in our humanness that we're not always certain exactly what the future will bring. For example, many of us have gotten sober, have made commitments, have stayed abstinent for a period of time, and then have experienced a relapse. At the moment when we got sober, we weren't planning on that relapse, but it came. And that's part of the reason that we take recovery as a one day at a time thing. So while my sankalpa, my heartfelt desire is to remain abstinent from drugs and alcohol, because I think that's important for where I need to go in my life, I recognize also that there could be a scenario in the future where somehow a different truth presents itself. You know, so I like to stay away, for me, I like to stay away from that being the sankalpa. The deeper sankalpa for me is the truth. Like I'm after the truth. Here's another sankalpa. My sankalpa is dedication to health, dedication to my health, to health and wellness in the body and in my mind. Yes. So hopefully you understand this idea. And all of us have different, you know, possibly different sankalpas, but I want to be really clear that it's not just, oh, you know, I'm making this commitment. It's a very, very, very profound commitment that comes from the deepest aspects of ourself, the things that are the most important to us, the things that we would work for in our life and direct our energy toward is sankalpa. And so this is the first ingredient, if you will, of the rest of the recovery code. The first ingredient, sankalpa. Now, when we first get sober, or we first step onto the path of recovery, we recognize that we've had behaviors, beliefs that haven't served us, that we've been stuck, and we've paid prices and consequences. So we make a shift in that moment. When we have a bottom, we shift onto the path of recovery. We may not be ready yet or clear enough in our mind yet to have a sankalpa. Our sankalpa might come later, over time. But in terms of cracking the code, if you will, for recovery, we will have to have this in our life. Now, we may have at that point of recovery a sankalpa. We may have that. And perhaps the sankalpa at that moment is, I just want to live. I don't want to die. My sankalpa is to do whatever I can not to die behind this disease of addiction. So that's a worthy commitment, and it's enough for us to get onto the path of recovery. So this idea of sankalpa is a code, if you will. It's a code by which you can live. And in early recovery, we are beginning to develop the code by which we live. It's like an approach to living. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's referred to as a design for living, a blueprint, if you will, for the way we can move from where we are to this other place. So the first commitment that many of us have made would be a commitment to go to 90 meetings in 90 days, if you're in the world of 12-step recovery. Whatever world you're in, though, whether it's 12-step or another approach to recovery, we do know that we have to take it each day. It has to be steady, the effort. Whatever that initial effort is, has to be steady daily. We stress daily. Why? Because we know that our addicted or addictive mindset, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, that our state of being requires a 24-hour approach to this thing. We're always subject to the calling of the ego. We're always subject to and potentially vulnerable to negative energies. Every day we work to right ourselves to rise up above those energies. So we're moving in this land of inspiration. We start to surround ourselves with other people who are also on this path, the path of recovery. And in surrounding ourselves with these other people, we can access power. We access their inspiration, or we are inspired by them. And we start building, whether we know it or not at that moment, we start building a sankalpa. We start building a heartfelt desire. And perhaps all of us have the sankalpa after a while of being committed to the truth. The second, and perhaps more of the so that's like a philosophy behind where we're going in recovery, in discovery, yeah? The second word I want to focus into here, so we went from inspiration, sankalpa, now we're going to go into orientation. Orientation is the key. It's the key. If you only hear one thing tonight, hear this message. Orientation, the way you orient yourself, is the key to your healing and your spiritual development. So we have an orientation towards our sankalpa. We have an orientation toward our heartfelt desire. Just for a moment, I want to remind you that while stuck in addiction, one might have thought one's heartfelt desire was to get more drugs and alcohol and do them. When you're stuck in active addiction, in this case to substances, one might think, my heartfelt desire is to acquire more of this substance and to do more of it. And of course, that's not your heart. In fact, if that's the thing that comes into your mind, we can say in a state of addiction, you are cut off from your heart. You're not even yet able to get to the voice of the heart because we're still stuck behind the addiction, which is like a wall, like an absolute wall that blocks you from being able to access the energy and the voice of the heart center. So we orient towards our sankalpa, we orient towards our recovery, we orient toward our search for truth. And that's enough in the beginning. And in fact, the orientation towards truth is enough no matter what stage of recovery you find yourself at. We want to orient ourselves toward health and wellness. We want to orient ourselves toward recovery in the broadest sense of that term. Whatever we do in those early stages, and then we come to find out later on in any stage, we are moving always, oriented always, and moving always towards support of our recovery, which we come to understand as synonymous with our search for truth. So if you think of recovery as search for truth, your sankalpa is search for truth, why would anybody ever want to relapse? You never would. You never would want to. And so we recognize that relapse comes from unconsciousness. One loses consciousness, one loses awareness of one's sankalpa, one's orientation. So we orient toward recovery. We have to literally orient our life toward it. Now, at the beginning, so many people think, oh my God, how awful. How awful. I have to orient toward this thing called recovery. That's weird. Why would I want to do that? Well, it's only weird until you consider the fact that your life has been oriented toward addictive behavior, that your reaction to life, to your emotions, your challenges, mental, physical, spiritual, that your orientation has been to not solve those problems, not go down a path of discovery and recovery, but to avoid those problems, to treat a symptom rather than to be able to treat the causes and conditions of the symptoms that have arisen. And so it's so very important that we, in recovery, we start to orient toward the resolution of our challenges in life, that we orient towards that as opposed to avoiding. So in the book, Recovery 2.0, I wrote, at the end of the day, addicts, people who struggle with addiction of any kind, are essentially addicted to looking away. We have a challenge, we look away. We have a frustration, creatively or otherwise, we look away. Something's bothering us, a resentment, anger, something, we look away. And of course, in looking away, it just stacks up. It stacks up. So part of recovery, or part of the recovery code, hopefully we're coming to understand that we have to orient ourselves towards living a certain way, not out of obligation, more because we recognize that to live in recovery is to live in an orientation towards the truth, towards a level of wisdom, of becoming and our potential, realizing our potential as a human being. And that orientation is not like, oh my God, why do I have to do this? It's, wow, thank God I found this. Thank God I was able to identify a path that I could walk, which led me towards the truth, which led me toward connection and peace within myself. So with orientation, we're going to want to look at this concept of one day at a time. One day at a time. I like to add the phrase to it. It's, yes, it's one day at a time, but it's every day. It's one day at a time, absolutely, and it's every day. So with our orientation, what are we doing? And with our sankalpa, we are engaging in a lifestyle, a style of living that involves actions, practices that lead to resolution of challenges as they arise and that lead to presence, true presence, and ultimately health, wellness, and here's the key word, freedom, true freedom, that we can release into this present moment and be free from the ravages of addiction, even at the level of just mind, the mental addictions or afflictions. I wrote about them as the 4 aggravations: negativity, self-doubt, procrastination, and resentment. To be free of these things and then to live life as a creative, connected being from that place. So our orientation is towards our sankalpa, towards the truth. Our orientation is towards our recovery, our health, and our wellness. How do we do it? One day at a time, but every day. And what does that mean? It means we are engaging in practices that lead to the resolution of the challenges we face and that lead ultimately to joy, peace, and freedom, happiness, contentment. So what practices are we talking about here in our orientation toward life? Many, many practices. One of the practices is called sadhana. Sadhana is basically, it's another Sanskrit word that means profound spiritual practice. Sadhana, morning practice, spiritual practice, is one of the things that we stress in Recovery 2.0. We stress it because in our one day at a time life, this orientation towards that sankalpa, we could call one day at a time a sankalpa. So how do you live? What's your commitment? I commit to living with presence in this day and to make this day as good as it can be, to bring my fullest attitude, energy, and altitude or elevation to it. So in our one day at a time sankalpa, this approach, this orientation to life, we start to look at each single day as a building block. Each single day is a building block for a week or a month or a year, or you could say each single day is a building block of your life. If you can go there in your mind with me and really understand the importance and the power of each single day, to orient yourself to that day, now it means we are going to become expert, eventually masters of architecting a beautiful, powerful, uplifting experience each 24-hour period. And of course, the day will begin when you awaken from your rest, from sleeping. And we'll call that the morning. So when the morning comes, we start right away and we get on a mat, or we go to our sacred space in front of our altar in our home, or we go to whatever natural environment that connects us to something greater, where we feel a sense of connection, a sense of joy. We feel a sense of empowerment. We feel a sense of calm. We can experience silence. We can cultivate focus and concentration. And we can begin to build awareness and elevate our consciousness. So that morning, if I say to you each 24-hour period, each day is the building block for your life, then what you do for the first hour or two that you are awake is the building block for your day. It's where you begin and get yourself on track. This is how important this is. So the development of a steady morning practice that puts you into connection with you, that helps you to create steadiness, strength, vigor, vitality, begins to unlock these capacities for intuition and wisdom. This is going to be just critically important for all of us. Yeah. Not just people who struggle with addiction, but everybody in the human condition. So every human being has benefited, who has done this practice. Other practices that we engage in to build our excellence at architecting a single unit of our life, which we refer to as a day, walking in nature, training the physical body, meditating to train the mental body, eating really healthy food, connecting with amazing people. Within recovery, we know we want to put ourselves around other people who are on a similar path. So we hit meetings. We sit in sacred circle together and we do meetings together. In the Recovery 2.0 universe, we have now, I think, nearly 35 meetings each week. And you can get to those at r20.com/meetings. And you can find the whole schedule there. So we go to meetings to connect with each other. And we also get together with other people in recovery or on spiritual paths, or who are dedicated to the truth, or who are dedicated to health and wellness, because these are points of overlap between our sankalpa and their sankalpa. And this is how we find our sacred community. We get together in all kinds of ways. We're getting together right now in this moment where we've decided to be together to look at the recovery code. We get together for yoga classes, meditation classes, meals. We go on trips together. We go outside into nature together. We speak to each other on the phone, or we meet each other in any locale, anywhere. And we delve into the work of being present with each other and feeling that love and joy. I just got done with 3 days at the Hollywood Bowl with Dead and Company. And we danced and we sang and we connected in such profound ways. It's just so uplifting, and felt so much love and so much joy there. And many people there I can connect with who share this orientation of recovery and discovery and exploration. And it's just so beautiful. So these are the things that we get to do. These are the joys of having the recovery code in our life. So there's this concept. One more, let's see where we are. Yeah, we're doing great. So 2 more concepts about orientation. Okay, wonderful. Thank you guys so much. Okay, so there are 2 more concepts with regards to our sankalpa and our orientation. One concept is called yoga in action, which I also refer to as recovery in action. For me, recovery and yoga are, at the very least, they're in the same universe, if they're not exactly the same thing. If yoga is, if you will, the process of moving from dark to light, isn't that what recovery is? If yoga is moving from disconnection into union, isn't that what recovery is? So I really see these things as similar. I guess when we talk about yoga, yoga may have some vitamins, if you will, that traditional sort of 12-step recovery doesn't involve or doesn't include, like, for example, the physical practice of postures, the breath work that yoga asks us to do, the meditative processes that yoga asks us to do. So there are differences, but I see the movement along a path of recovery similar to the movement of yoga along a path of yoga. Yoga in action is defined as 3 things in the scriptures, in the ancient scriptures. And I'll put these terms here in the chat bar so you can see it. The first term is tapas, much like the Spanish dish, the Spanish style of eating, tapas. So this word is an important word. Tapas, you can see it there in the chat bar, just like it's spelled for you normally. Tapas in Sanskrit, the way I'll break it down for you is, this is a word that describes your practice of facing your own resistance. So it's a pretty incredible thing if you think about it. Tapas are practices where you face your own resistance. These practices build inner resilience, just an incredible, incredible thing. So what's an example of a tapas on the recovery path? Well, I named one before, 90 meetings in 90 days. Why is that considered tapas? I've never known anybody who took on the commitment to do 90 meetings in 90 days who didn't at some point along the way have some resistance come up, some doubt, some confusion, some laziness, some obstinacy, some kind of stubbornness come up in that process, because as we're going to 90 meetings in 90 days, we're beginning a new pattern of being. We're creating new neural circuitry. We're creating new routines into our life, which are changing us. And, if we know anything about the ego likes the status quo, not interested in changing. The ego likes the status quo. So as we begin to change, naturally our resistance will arise. And so doing the 90 meetings in 90 days is considered, in my book, a tapas. So someone in the future, if we ever combined language of yoga with language of recovery, someone in a 12-step room might say, I've taken on the tapas of 90 meetings in 90 days, which is really an accurate thing to say. I've taken on this commitment to face my own resistance to what I know is good for me, to face my own resistance to what I know is good for me. What's a tapas on the yoga side of things? Well, I also mentioned one before, which was sadhana practice, your morning practice. Now, anybody who takes on, let's say, a 40-day commitment, we like to do things in 40 days because it helps, really 40 days helps to build a new habit into the mind and body. So if you take on a 40-day sadhana commitment, that's a tapas. That's a tapas practice. That's surely you are going to face some resistance, and you're going to go through that resistance, and you're going to show commitment, and you're going to show stability, and you're going to get through that, and you're going to make yourself into a much, much stronger, more capable person. You will unlock all kinds of abilities for yourself. Again, we'll talk about this on Thursday, but that's a tapas. That's a tapas. Somebody might be taking on the tapas of some kind of regime with regards to food. Some people are gluten intolerant, or it's helpful for them to let go of sugar or processed foods or unnecessary forms of sugar, I should say. And so for a period of 30 days, or of course, giving up caffeine or nicotine, these are huge commitments, resistance is going to come up, right? We know that about this. And that's part of what the challenge is. But our tapas, our yoga in action, begins with this tapas, with these practices. This is yoga in action, recovery in action. The second aspect of recovery in action, or yoga in action, is called, I'll put it in here again, this is a weird word, swadhyaya. Sanskrit term. I'll spell it with a W. It's sometimes spelled with a V, but I'll spell it phonetically. Okay, swadhyaya. Swadhyaya. Let's put this in the chat bar for you. Okay, there you go. Swadhyaya. Okay, swadhyaya means self-study, self-inquiry, the study of one's direct experience. The study of one's direct experience. In yoga, we are taught to study our own experience, and we're told that we can't believe anything without putting it to the test of our own direct experience and our understanding. So hopefully you don't encounter teachers who tell you what to believe, but rather they point you to your personal experience so that you can develop knowledge and wisdom based upon your own experience in life. And this is where you can take something that's a belief and move it into something that's more knowledge or wisdom based. So we study our own life. It's a real powerful part of yoga in action. Of course, it's an important part of recovery in action as well. How do we look at that on the recovery side of things? Well, just think of the 12 steps, or any process, any spiritual process is going to ask you to study your life. How are you feeling? You can start with that question. if you just really ask yourself any given morning, how am I feeling? And you can sit for a minute and wait for the response. You'll get a physical response. How am I feeling physically? Go a little bit deeper, connect with the breath for a minute. How's my breath today? How's the flow of inhale and exhale? Inhala, exhala. How is this working for me? How's my mind? What is my experience of being in this body here today? That question alone is going to get you to a lot of places and to a lot of awareness. And it will also help to direct you to places in case you need to address certain things as you go. So Swadhyaya is this study of oneself, asking questions throughout the day, asking questions about your patterns, the patterns of relationship with everything, the pattern of your relationship with yourself. How's your self-talk? Do you complete any negative sentences in your head about yourself? My teacher, Guru Prem, he said, don't complete a negative sentence about yourself in your head. So that's become a practice of mine now because I'm interested in me. I'm interested in me. I really, really love myself and the effort in this world. I love it. I love it. And it's important to cultivate that. So when I make mistakes, which is all the time, every day, some mistakes, right? So to catch it, to understand what's going on here. What are my patterns? How am I in relationship to self? What else? Relationship with the planet Earth. How are you treading on this planet? All your purchases, the way you are in the world, the way you connect with food, which comes from the planet. How's your diet? How prayerful are you when you eat? So these are relationships. And then, of course, our relationships with other people, our family, friends, colleagues, and our romantic relationships. And our patterns start to show themselves. And this is our way towards self-inquiry, towards understanding ourselves, forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, harmony in our relationships, moving to this wonderful place. This is yoga in action, recovery in action. Asks us to do this. Also, one aspect of swadhyaya or self-inquiry is to study scriptures, meaning spiritually wise, time-tested texts that lead to deeper truths. So not only do we study our own direct experience, but we also work with teachers and we work with colleagues and we work with our community, our sacred sangha, which means our community of truth. And we work to draw the spiritual nuggets and the goodness out of certain books that we look at. Very powerful. And then the third aspect of yoga in action or recovery in action is surrender. This is surrender to truth, surrender to the supreme intelligence of the universe, the supreme ever-present intelligence all around us, and to surrender into that intelligence that we may be connected to it and live from it. This is ultimately truth, capital T. Okay. So that's pretty good. There's one last word I want to come to, just to reiterate. We started with inspiration. We're in the recovery code. We started with inspiration and sankalpa, this heartfelt commitment or vow that reflects our higher ideals. We spoke about orientation deeply, and now we're going to head into elevation. So when we talk about elevation, in the yogic sense of this, we're talking about the expansion of consciousness, meaning that we rise to levels, unfolding levels of greater wisdom, greater awareness and wisdom. That where we began in this life, we will be somewhere forward in terms of expansion of consciousness from that place, that we will have increased our awareness, hopefully, and built consciousness, hopefully. And the way that happens is we have to be involved in this process of elevation. How do we do it? Well, we want to get up high to be able to see from a different vantage point. And the analogy is walking up to high ground so that you can see things more clearly below. We want to elevate our attitude, not just our altitude, but our attitude. So that's the energy, the thoughts, the feelings, the energy that we bring to a situation is our attitude. So we want to remain in this attitude always of openness. Protectedness sometimes, protected, which means just aware, not closed off. Protected is not closed off, but protected, but open. Open, always willing to consider what's being shown to us. That goes back to Sobriety Ayah or self-study. So we elevate our altitude, we elevate our attitude, we elevate our vibration or frequency. We speak a lot about this in Recovery 2.0, the frequency of addiction being a low grade frequency that keeps us stuck like in a force field of negativity and challenge and problems. And it's a place from which it's very difficult to make progress until we break out of that frequency. And the way to do that, the way to elevate our altitude, the way to elevate our attitude, the way to elevate our frequency, we have to engage in certain kinds of practices. And so I want to talk about transformation practices. Transformation practices. So this is the path of discovery. We call Recovery 2.0 the path of discovery. Why do we call it the path of discovery? Because we are committed to the truth. And when you're committed to the truth, it means you're going to go from where we are right now to another location. That other location could be considered a location where our current challenges do not exist. So in a transformational practice, moving along a path of discovery, we're moving from where we are to another location. You could say a place of greater consciousness and awareness where our current challenges no longer exist. So we're going to transcend and transform up to another level. And that's what we do here on the path of discovery. The practices that we talk about, I refer to them as Kriya. Now that word is Kriya. And this is a beautiful word, a beautiful, beautiful Sanskrit word, which helps us to unlock and unpack the meaning behind it. Kriya, we'll look at it as evolutionary right action. A Kriya is an action you engage in that brings about evolution, transformation, expansion of awareness and consciousness. And so on the path of yoga, we talk about Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga. We talk about this movement created by these practices that fall under the heading of Kriya. That's why in Recovery 2.0, we so often do Kriyas, specific sets of exercises that lead to very profound transformational effects. I like to use the language of, I like to use the visual of a river. And so we'll call it the river of Kriya, the river of Kriya. If we're on a path of discovery, we've made a commitment to the truth. We engage in these Kriyas, we step into the river of Kriya. The river of Kriya is flow. We just keep going, we just keep going, we just keep going. And it's like a commitment to step into that river of Kriya, that we're going to be engaged continually in evolutionary right action. We choose to do it. This is our sankalpa, and we would choose to be there, to step into this river. And that's just a very, very powerful thing. So when we do these Kriyas, when we do the breath work that we do, when we do the sadhanas that we do, when we do the different sets that we do, we're doing them with transformation in mind. We're doing them because we have made a commitment to move from where we are to another location, a location where the current challenges we face no longer exist. We work through them where we are, we engage in our evolutionary practices, and we move forward. And this gives tremendous meaning and purpose to our life. All along the way, as we make this move from where we are to this other location, the location, the true and real location where we are, never actually changes. We just come to greater and greater revelations of the truth, which is here and now. Our positionality is always here. Our time is always now. Anything else is just sort of the mind's way of trying to figure out how to make sense of it all. We use past and present and future to do that. So you see, we have this commitment and this opportunity to move from where we are to another location. By other location, I simply mean we've arrived at a greater level of understanding of this location, the only location, which is the infinite now and the ever-present here. And that's what we're doing. So that is the recovery code. It has to do with our inspiration, our sankalpa, the way that we orient ourselves, or orientation. It has to do with yoga in action or recovery in action. It has to do with elevation and these practices which create transformation and create possibility for us. Everybody on a path of recovery from addiction is going to have to engage in something that elevates their consciousness, or what? They will remain stuck in the patterns that have challenged them, the causes and conditions that brought on a desire to engage in addictive behavior in the first place will remain until we do the work of moving through, processing through, working with, and then ultimately transcending to that next location, that greater awareness of the only location, our location here and now. So I'm hoping that when you hear this and you hear about, the recovery code, that you reflect upon your own experience, and that as you are all, some of you are members of Recovery 2.0, and you know that almost every day of the week, we have something that we do together in this format, whether that's a yoga class that I teach on Wednesday morning or Friday morning, or a Thursday night coaching where we sit together and we address certain questions that come up in our community, or it's a Monday night like we're doing this series right now. Or if you're not a member, my hope is that you're engaging in things that continually work this muscle for you so that you can continue to move around along your path of discovery. Of course, if you want to become a member with us, you are most invited, and we will welcome you with open arms. That's always available to you. In fact, I'll put the link in here just so you can see, r20.com/join. There you go. So the last thing I'd like to leave you with tonight, I have about 6 minutes left in our presentation. I'd like to sort of really bring home for you the importance of immersive experiences. In my recovery and my approach to spirituality and personal development, I want to come right out and tell you, I have not been always the most consistent. Meaning, I may not have done something like, I may not have done all the things I said I was going to do every day. What I did do was always commit to the truth, always commit to, the practices that lead me forward. And if I missed a day, what did I do? Did I use that as an excuse to beat myself up? No, of course not. That wouldn't be the truth. That wouldn't be based in truth. That would be based in shame or guilt, which are almost never fully based in the truth. Those are feelings that arise out of experiences that make us feel off the mark. But you see, where I have gotten the most, without question, in my recovery is by engaging in immersive experiences. And that's why in Recovery 2.0, I so strongly suggest to people, please engage with us in our 8-week awakening program. Please engage with us in the courses we do. Please engage with us in the live retreats that we do in Costa Rica, India, and in the US when COVID permits. But those moments for me where I spent 3 days, 7 days, 14 days, 30 days, 60 days committed to a process, in those commitments where I oriented myself towards a body of work with other people, that was going to be, I was going to be led through something. And all I had to do was just show up with the right attitude and engage for that period of time. What I have found is that the resonance, the reverberation, the continuing, I guess I'll say, vibration of the work that I did in those periods of time has supported me through 30 years of my recovery. So even if you're not, oh my God, I can't do things every day, I don't feel like I'm consistent, get yourself into an immersive experience, and we will help you be consistent through that period of time. And then that's how we elevate together to the next level. So our next immersive experience is coming up 1 month from this coming Thursday. 1 month from this coming Thursday. And that immersive experience is the 8-week awakening program. We begin on December 4th and we'll go all the way through the end of January. Why do you think we position the program in December and January? Holidays, family, food, completion, so the end of a year, beginning another year with momentum. It's so critically important. Many people in here can testify they've taken the program before. It's also different every single time I teach it because we teach to where we are now, not to where we've been. So the program is always going to be different. This year's 8-week awakening, we are focusing on, obviously we're focusing on the breath work, the installation of sacredness, the reinstallation of sacredness into life, I should say. And we're really focusing on Sankalpa. And we're really focusing on steadiness of practice and being able to create consistency and being able to surrender into this eternal now and this ever-present here. So join us.